Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to IFA's first panel discussion in 2025. And we have a very interesting subject, India-US relations under the new US president. This is very timely because President-elect Trump is going to be elected the 47th President of the United States of America in less than a week. And of course, his statements have already made waves. But to speak more on it, we have very eminent panelists on this subject. I would also like to request everyone to kindly put their phones on silent mode. And I would now like to request Dr. Dennis, Director, International House, Chicago University, to please come on stage and present a bouquet to the eminent panelists. First in the list is my batchmate, Ambassador Arun Singh. Next to Ambassador Pankaj Sharan. Dr. Surajit Bhalla. Dr. Chintamani Mahapatra. And Ms. Suhasini Haider.
No, you have Lieutenant General Narendra Singh.
Sorry.
Thank you.
And Lieutenant General Narendra Singh, please.
Thank you.
Sorry. Lieutenant General Narendra Singh. Sorry, sir.
No problem. Thank you.
I now invite Dr. Dennis Jorgens to say a few words. You have to.
Good evening, and thank you all for joining us for this very special program. My name is Denise Jorgens, and I'm the Director of International House at the University of Chicago. This series of programs focusing on Indo-US relations has now become an annual event, co-sponsored together with the Indo-American Friendship Association, the University of Chicago Center here in Delhi, and International House at the University of Chicago. This year, we are so pleased to also partner with International House Berkeley and International Students House London. It is an honor to welcome our distinguished panel of speakers and special guests, including the directors of our sister houses in Berkeley and London, who are seated here in the front. Welcome. We also welcome our alumni and friends and colleagues from around the world, as well as our students and other community members to tonight's program. This past year was an important year for the International Houses Worldwide organization, as the first international house established in New York City in 1924 celebrated their 100th anniversary. From the day the first International House opened, our mission has been to promote cross-cultural understanding, mutual respect, and friendship among students and scholars, and among the people of the various metropolitan communities that we serve. Through the International House Student Life Experience and our internationally focused public programs, such as this evening's event, International House is dedicated to transforming people's lives for a better world. This mission is further extended through the work of the International Houses Worldwide organization, which is currently a network of 15 houses on 4 continents. I want to thank Ambassador Surendra Kumar for his long-standing and strong relationship with the University of Chicago and with International Houses Worldwide. Partnerships between organizations such as the Indo-American Friendship Association and International Houses Worldwide are critical in supporting the engaging, interesting, vibrant community and programs that we all enjoy on our campuses and around the world. I hope to see many of you at future events and ask that you remain engaged and supportive members of our worldwide community. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Ambassador Surendra Kumar to begin tonight's program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very warm welcome on this chilly evening. I met Denise in February 2000. It will be 25 years next month. And we have been having, I retired long back, but our friendship continues, and so does cooperation in organizing something intellectual and also some food for thought. Now, we couldn't have found much more eminent panel than what we have. Welcome to you all and welcome to them because they have made extra effort to be with us. Ambassador Arun Kumar Singh has been ambassador to Israel, to France, to US. He was member of National Security Advisory Board. He is currently visiting professor at Ashoka University. He has also been a visiting professor at several US universities, including Johns Hopkins University. He's a non-resident senior fellow at the Carnegie India, columnist, commentator. You see him very often on television. He writes on anything, on Afghanistan, to Israel, to France, to USA. So thank you very much, Arun, he has been a great supporter of IFA. He has, I think, participated maybe around 10 programs. For the first time, we have a pleasure to welcome Ambassador Pankaj sir, and I think he's the only person who is coming first. Now, all others have come more than once. He has been ambassador to Russia, High Commissioner to Bangladesh. He served several successive prime ministers at PMO. He is currently a member of National Security Advisory Board, and he has served with distinction as Deputy National Security Advisor. Presently, he is a convener of NatStat, a Delhi-based independent center for research on strategic and security issues. Lieutenant General Rajinder Singh, an old friend of mine, he is former DG of Infantry and also Force Commander UN Force Commander UMMI, United Nations Peace Mission in Ethiopia and Eritrea. And we used to meet in the Mountain High Italian Fort when I was High Commissioner in Kenya. We have played many matches, and he allowed his team to lose because he wanted the High Commissioner team to win. This is the spirit of the armed forces. He's a decorated soldier, recipient of PBSM, and he was also CEO of DLF Foundation, which made a lot of name during his short term there. We have Dr. Surjit Bhalla. I think many friends from America should be very pleased to know that he holds a PhD from Princeton University. He has taught economics at Delhi School of Economics, but he has also worked for Rand Corporation, Brookings Institution, and the World Bank. He's a known economist who was a part-time member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, and he was also Executive Director of India on the IMF. He has authored several books, How We Vote, the very recent book, 2024, Citizen Raj, The Middle Class Kingdom of China and India, and also his interests go beyond economics. Who and Why of the Best of Indian Cricket. He is contributing editor of Indian Express. Professor Chintamani Mahapatra is a former rector of JNU. He is a former professor of American, Latin American Canadian Studies at JNU for more than 30 years. He is now honorary chairman of Kalinga Institute of Indo-Pacific Studies. He has authored 8 books. He's guided 26 PhD scholars, and he has visited most of the presidential libraries in USA to collect material for his research. He is also editor of the Foreign Affairs, a publication brought out by the Indian Association of Retired Diplomats. Now we have Ms. Swasini Haider. She's one of the most sought after, talked about, popular commentator, columnist, editor of the Hindu, one of the oldest newspaper, most prestigious. She also brings out her online weekly program, Worldview with Swasini Haider. She has been earlier the prime time editor, foreign affairs editor at the CNN IBN. She was also at one time correspondent of CNN's bureau in New Delhi. So I think I have covered everybody. Now I don't want to preempt what my eminent panelists are going to say. I only say a few things. We are fortunate we are not Canada. We are fortunate we are not Mexico. We are not Greenland either. And whatever president-elect, now the certified, though still to be sworn as president, has been saying, is creating a lot of heat in different quarters. People are reacting that we can relax. I wrote an article saying we can still relax. We can still conjure images of Howdy Modi or Namaste Trump and the strolling romantic walk on the lawns of Taj Mahal. But predicting anything about President Trump is the most unpredictable thing. But I hope that in spite of all concern people might have about tariffs, about H-1 visa, about the ongoing investigation, about Patwan Singh Pannu, Patwan Singh Pannu and all that, I think our relations have reached a stage we can handle all these things. When you have such multi-dimensional relationships, so mature, and there is such bipartisan support for relations, good relations between India and US, whatever differences which we have, they can't be allowed to become dispute. I'm sure we have enough maturity in Indian and American leadership to handle and address those issues and look forward to much more stronger, closer, warmer relations in spite of all the differences. We have seen even during President Biden. We have differences with Ukraine. We continued buying oil from Russia, didn't we? So there are mature countries can handle these things, and I'm sure President Donald Trump will find having a good relationship with India is as much interest of USA as in India's interest. 2 days back, the outgoing ambassador of US here, Eric Garcetti, made a speech and he gave some 4 points: preserving peace, joint prosperity, saving the planet, people to people. Now you can have a whole program on all these and question whether how much of it is happening, how will it happen, not happen. But we were very happy to have him here, and we wish him good luck, success, whatever he does henceforth. And we also look forward to meeting tonight the DCM, Mr. Jorgen Andrews, who will be the CDA for coming months. Ladies and gentlemen, you are in their hands, and I'm sure you'll find it very interesting, educating, and also a discussion which offers you something to think about. Thank you. As usual, we will request our friend, Professor Chintamani Mahapatra. I must tell all of you have 10 minutes, as I mentioned in my messages earlier. When 8 minutes you get first buzzer means 2 minutes left, 10 minutes means second buzzer. That means you make place for the next speaker. And floor is open to you. Mr. Timekeeper, your time begins now.
Namaste. Good evening. Ambassador Kumar, let me thank you at the outset for yet another opportunity to share some of my thoughts on Indo-US relationship, distinguished panelists, respected audience. We are living in very interesting times and difficult times. After the election in the United States and the victory of Donald Trump, return of Donald Trump to White House yet again, there are hopes in certain parts of the world. There is despair in some other parts of the world. There are expectations in certain quarters. There are fears, anxieties, and apprehensions in other quarters. Is the Ukraine war going to be over on 20th of January? Is the Middle Eastern war going to be over soon after that? Is the US going to have a return to the days of imperialism and take Panama, Greenland, and Canada, Greenland, and Panama, and extend itself? We don't know, but there are anxieties, hopes, fears. I think in India, there are no hopes, there are no anxieties, no apprehensions. By and large, whatever little I read in the newspapers and the reaction from the people, we are stable. Our Prime Minister knows Donald Trump very well. They have spent 4 years together. And in next 4 years, what is going to happen is all political astrology. Whatever I may say just now may actually may not happen after 20th of January. But still, it is important to say a few points. Professor Kumar has asked us to focus on certain issues. One very important issue is, of course, the issue of immigration and the H-1B visa. I don't know how many people in this hall are aware that H-1B virus is spreading in the United States. I don't think any one of you have heard it. There is a video which is circulating in the social media. It says one American guy, he's visiting all Indian shops and collecting signatures. And he's saying that sign onto this that you are not going to spread H-1B. Apparently, the features of H-1B virus is diarrhea and some smell which comes from India. Right? But then the guy who is doing this probably is concerned, worried about illegal immigration in the United States. And Donald Trump has spoken many times against illegal immigration. I don't think any Indian would have anything to quarrel with the American president trying to throw out illegal immigrants from the United States. But then why put all the blame on Donald Trump? In 2024, apparently, every 1 hour, 6 Indians were deported. At the moment, roughly about 18,000, 17,000 something Indians are there in the waiting list to be deported back to India. I don't think we should worry much about those who have done illegal things and the government of the United States is trying to protect its own interest and throw them out. But the real concern is about the H-1B visa. And the H-1B visa issue in the United States, the debate is ravaging on. There's a certain amount of polarization in the United States, even by the heavyweights. On the one side, you have big name like Elon Musk. Some people say he's the shadow president. Other people say he's the co-president. Other people think that all the time he is beside Donald Trump. And he's for H-1B visa. He himself came from South Africa to the United States under H-1B visa and see what it's done to America for its growth, prosperity, and all. So he's supporting it. But then on the other extreme, you have Steve Bannon. He's dead against immigrants. And they are clashing. They hate each other in a way. So what is going to happen, we do not know. But whatever little understanding I have, why this debate is going on in the US at the moment, apparently there are a few reasons. Number one, I feel, is the jealousy factor. The Indian-American immigrants there are doing so well in all sectors of life in the United States, whether it is education or health or banking or business or new startups or technology sector, they're doing very well. Certainly, it is very human to be jealous of a community which is prospering so fast and increasing its influence in the political processes as well in the United States. But there is also a factor of anxiety and fear. And what is that fear? This fear is slowly, the demography in the United States is changing. And when people from different parts of the world, the new immigrants are going there, and deep into the future, you see that the whole demography has changed, some people would not like it. And they are opposing immigration as such right now. Long time ago, Judge Bernard Shaw, he made a statement which was racist. He said, 100% American is 100% a fool, an idiot. What did that mean? The 100% Americans were Native Americans. The rest of the Americans flew from somewhere or went by ship to the United States. Right? So throughout the history, we have seen the new immigrants are always disliked, always discriminated by the old immigrants. And right now, at one time you heard about the yellow peril, the China coolies, and now a similar thing is happening in a very big way. And the fear in India and the fear in the Indian students, Indian H-1B visa holders in the US is this. This kind of misinformation, they would say, is spreading in such a way they may be targeted. And what is the misinformation? The misinformation that is being paraded by the advocates who are against immigration are the following. Number one, the Indian companies there, hundreds of them, are actually creating new jobs in the USA and hiring the American citizens there. There's one company which has about 80% of its workforce, and all of them, 80% of them happen to be Native Americans, American citizens and all that. Then there are many companies which are involved in innovation. Other Indian companies are, investing in very big, in the Silicon Valley and so many, they're starting new businesses and new jobs are being created. If that is the reality, and the Indians are not actually taking away the jobs, then this kind of misinformation is ultimately going to start a culture war. They don't like Indians, not because of these facts, but because they are misinformed, that their jobs are being taken away. Studies have been done, and the study says the Indian Americans H-1B holders, I'm focusing on Indian American H-1B holders, who are doing a job which is actually complementary to jobs in the US of American citizens. So they are not competing, they are not rivals, they are not replacing, they are complementary. So if this is the case, then why should the Indian Americans be targeted by certain groups? So this is one major concern. Then there is another issue that Ambassador Kumar asked me to deal with, is Elon Musk. This is another interesting phenomenon. And this phenomenon says the power of money and the power of an individual to influence policy making and policy decisions at high places. Apparently, he spent about $277 million to ensure Trump victory. And as I said earlier, he is now behaving like a co-president. And what kind of impact it may have? For a long time, the Western imperial powers interfered in the domestic affairs of the rest of the world, the colonies. Later, more recently, we hear about Chinese and the Russian interference in elections in the West, including in the United States. But now, because of Elon Musk, there is going to be West versus West. He is supporting the far-right groups in Germany, in France, in other parts of Europe. And there are complaints that this kind of influence is coming from the United States, Elon Musk, the far-right. Far-right is very loosely described. All these far-right, although you recall, Italy's fascism or Germany's Nazism, they're not like that. The underlying factor is most of the far-right party, whatever may be the definition, are against the immigrants. And we can see voices against immigration in Europe, in the US, in Canada, in many, many places. What kind of impact that may have on India, we cannot say for certain that Indians are going to be targeted, but there will be some fallout of this. So with these two brief comments, sir, thank you for inviting me. More during Q&A. Thank you for your attention.
Okay. Now I turn to my friend General Rajendra Singh. I think defense sector has seen the most phenomenal progress in the last 10 years. See a volume of the trade and the kind of thing we are purchasing, you're talking about. He will brief about all what has happened during previous term of Donald Trump and President Biden and what we can look for forward. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Surendra Kumar, fellow panelists and friends. Firstly, at the outset, let me tell you that as far as the defense and the armed forces are concerned, that cannot be overlooked as far as the relationship between India and US is concerned. Unlike what has happened today here, when our worthy MC forgot to mention about a panelist from the army. But having said that, let me tell you that as far as defense cooperation is concerned, defense cooperation is the centerpiece as far as relations between India and US is concerned. We have it is a cornerstone of our bilateral relationship, shaped by shared interests in security, technology, countering regional threats. And under Donald Trump, even in his earlier term, we have seen a quantum jump as far as the defense relationship is concerned. And we feel that in the next term of his, we are going to see that trend continuing. So before we analyze this further, let me break my talk into three major portions. First is that I will discuss as to what really happened in the last term of Donald Trump as far as defense cooperation is concerned. And then we will talk as to what is the likelihood of events happening as far as defense cooperation is concerned in his second term. And lastly, we will be talking about likely scenarios and what could possibly be happening, or what can we really expect as far as the future is concerned. Coming on to a recap of the defense cooperation under Donald Trump's first presidency, a number of things had happened. First and foremost was Indo-Pacific. This gained a lot of importance. Second was renaming of the US Pacific Command to US Indo-Pacific Command. And he had also made certain changes in the Department of Defense and has created certain groups specific to Indo-Pacific. US also suspended $300 million aid to Pakistan. He has also concentrated towards strengthening of strategic partnership. A number of key agreements were signed, like communication, compatibility, and security agreement, that is COMCASA, and basic exchange and cooperation agreement for geospatial cooperation. These were signed, and this is likely to be having major impacts even in the future. Arms sale and trade, this took a quantum jump, and USA became one of India's largest arms supplier. And Quad revival is another major thing which happened. Trump was able to revitalize Quad, and the various happenings which you are seeing today really have been started by Trump. And however, having said all this, there were a number of challenges as well. Firstly, India's purchase of Russian S-400 AD system was not liked by Trump at all. And he had threatened, he did everything possible to ensure that, or to dissuade us from doing so. We didn't. And trade challenges, my friend Mr. Mahapatra has already talked about. There have been a number of challenges as far as trade and our systems of or our dealing with our H-1B1 visa and various other things are concerned. This continued even earlier. The key areas of likely defense cooperation which are likely to take place in future. I think currently our collaboration includes joint exercises, security initiatives, arms sale, and defense technology co-production, and sometimes transfer of technology, which is just starting. India has contracted for nearly 20 billion worth of US origin defense articles since 2008. This has been a major achievement. We feel that I feel that the normal, that under Trump too, we are likely to see, as far as combat exercises are concerned, they are going to continue. They are in fact going to be increased in scope and size. Exercises like Malabar type will also find a quantum jump. There will be increased cooperation in Indian Ocean region. We are going to have new area of underwater domain awareness in the light of Chinese submarines lurching in that area. As far as sale of arms and co-production and transfer of technology is concerned, the whole the scorecard is slightly mixed. Russia has historically been India's primary weapons supplier, and it used to have nearly more than 60% of our total weapons supplies coming from Russia. This has, however, come down to 36%, and this has been replaced by various Western countries and United States. Between France and United States together, they today form 46% of our total defense imports, which is a quantum jump. There is a possibility of co-production and co-development of cutting-edge defense equipment and technology. Though US has now bagged various lucrative Indian defense deals, India, however, now wants to shift from an outright off-the-shelf purchases to co-production, make in India, transfer of technology. US has always been more cautious as far as transfer of technology is concerned. When I was Director General Infantry, we tried our best, even for mundane systems like rifles and machine guns and all, they were quite hesitant in transferring technology. I think that particular thing is likely to change. As far as the co-production, there have been certain movement which has already taken place, and I think this will continue. Tejas Mark II fighters will get a new engine, probably some transfer of technology. There will be, there are Striker ICVs with Javelin anti-tank weapon systems which are going to be also on the scorecard. There is also a maintenance, repair, and overall facility in India, which is going to make a quantum jump as far as our dependence on United States is concerned for our normal functioning or normal maintenance of our equipment, which has been imported for states. As far as the military alliances and the various this thing is concerned, I think the priority is going to be on strategic partnership. Trump on India's strategic autonomy is likely to be more tolerable than what Democrats have been. As far as Quad is concerned, I think mechanism, Trump is going to be slightly more assertive, which may not always which may not be always to the liking of the Indian system. As far as defense trade and technology transfers are concerned, things are changing, and they will change for the better. And as far as challenges and limitations are concerned, we are today seeing, as far as sanctions on Russia is concerned, we are not quite sure as to what is going to happen. And should peace prevail, probably sanctions will ease, which will be to the betterment of our defense deals with Russia. There are economic and domestic priorities which are going to play a large role in our functioning, both in India as also in United States. Lastly, I would only mention that as far as our defense cooperation is concerned, I think the future is bright. But we have to remain cautious. We have to wait and watch. Let's see as to what future brings to us. Thank you.
Thank you, General, for ending on an optimistic note. Future is bright. We will see. Now I turn to Swasini Haider. She is never known to mince her words, always give a lot of food for thought. So over to you, Ms. Swasini Haider.
Thank you, Ambassador. And thank you to all of you. You're very brave people to come out on this cold evening to discuss what is definitely a subject on many people's minds as Monday comes closer, January 20th. We've all been preoccupied with just what kind of inaugural Mr. Trump is going to have, how he's breaking with tradition by inviting certain leaders, why he isn't inviting certain other leaders. Many had thought that maybe Prime Minister Modi would go. Now the sense is that perhaps he will be one of the first invitees in the next few months. Regardless of what actually happens on Monday and that sort of thing, I think we have to unpack what we expect in the next 4 years on the basis of things we do know. Because to paraphrase, I think it was Colin Powell, there are the known knowns and then there are the unknown unknowns. And Mr. Trump tends to spend most of his sort of working as president in the unknown area. You can see from the immediate reactions to his election that there's a certain nervousness in the world. I mean, I see it from our point of view. The fact that our top leadership has, the External Affairs Minister has made 3 visits in 6 months to the US, means there's a sense that we do need some shoring up going on. Why is that? Ambassador Surendra Kumar may remember that he'd invited me to a similar talk in 2017 when we were just embarking on the Trump era and trying to decipher again what it would mean. And I'd spoken about what is known popularly as the madman theory, which is associated much more with the Nixon presidency. But the madman theory is very simple, that when you have in a very powerful office that has an impact on the entire world, somebody who is seen as volatile, somebody who is seen as unpredictable, everybody else begins to behave in a much more predictable manner. So you saw perhaps an India-China détente happen more or less right away. We saw the German chancellor pick up the phone and call the Russian president, something they haven't done for some years. We saw Mr. Zelensky there in Ukraine say, yes, we expect to have some kind of an ending, a diplomatic negotiation by the end of 2025. We've seen Mr. Netanyahu now receive Mr. Trump's designated envoy and apparently accept, and I'm just going by what Harith said yesterday, accept a deal that he rejected a year ago. So there is already this nervousness and it is palpable across the world. So if we're talking about not being sure, we're certainly not alone. So I will just say that in the next few years, what we can say will happen would depend really on 3 things. 3 things that we can be sure of. The rest is, of course, as I said, the unknown unknowns. What Mr. Trump did in Trump 1.0, what he has said during his campaign and subsequently after, because we know that that is at the top of his mind, and who his nominees for these top positions are. And in the next 2 days, you'll see many of those nominees go through the hoops with their confirmation hearings happening. in terms of what he did with the first, in his first tenure. I think at the top, we all know that the bonhomie between him and Prime Minister Modi was something everyone referred to as euphoric. The fact that you had the US president come to a public rally that Prime Minister Modi was holding in Houston, and then for the Indian Prime Minister to invite Mr. Trump to a public rally in India, certainly not perhaps unprecedented. We've had these kind of dual public rallies in the past, but not in such quick succession and with such large numbers. But I think that while we look at the personal ties, we must also remember some of the other things. So I'm just going to quickly jog your memory about some of the other things Mr. Trump did do that affected India. He withdrew India's GSP status for exporters, something that has not yet been returned. He insisted on quid pro quos of Indian investment in India. In fact, there was a big deal for $2.5 billion that he wanted India to put in for Petronet, for LNG supplies. That MOU never actually fructified once Mr. Trump left power. So the question is, will they resurrect something like that? The previous speakers were quite right that when the US pushed on the subject of Russia, India said no. But on the subject of Iran, India did give in. India did zero out all its oil imports from Iran, a very important supplier. 12% of India's oil in those days, very, very cheap, very sweet crude that was coming from Iran, was zeroed out because Mr. Trump basically sent a fiat. And he sent it around the world, and India was amongst the countries that complied. He insisted through the COVID pandemic on India changing its export rules. He openly threatened India when it came to tariffs on subjects like the Harley-Davidson. So those are also part of what Mr. Trump did when he was in power the last time. And I think one can expect that his tactics have not changed that much. So what one can assume from there is that what Mr. Trump wants, he will certainly make a really big push to get. And it's a question of how India wishes to respond to that. I think in terms of what he has said so far, apart from the personal praise of India, and he's made it clear, I think one place where India will feel a certain amount of relief compared to the Biden administration will be the US's tinkering, if you like, in India's neighborhood. In the last 4 years, India has been visibly surprised at times and certainly annoyed at others to see the US's role in countries like Bangladesh, even Sri Lanka, Nepal, Maldives. And I think it is very clear from what Mr. Trump has said so far that this administration is not going to be looking as closely at the neighborhood around India. The big reason for the engagement with Pakistan, perhaps in the past, has now gone away with all US troops being pulled out of Afghanistan. There's the subject of tariffs, and I think we have to also look at the fact that India's Make in India program, which was really announced at perhaps the beginning of Prime Minister Modi's tenure, actually went into a new phase with PLIs and other kinds of incentives for making in India only after the Trump tenure had kind of ended, so towards 2020. The question is, are these going to be allowed to continue without comment from the US administration? And I think finally you have to look at the question of Mr. Trump's, we used to say, what is he going to walk out of next? Because Mr. Trump came to power the last time and he walked out of the JCPOA deal with Iran. He walked out of the COP agreement on climate change. He walked out of UNESCO. He walked out of the UN Human Rights Council. He threatened to walk out of WTO. He's now threatening to walk out of WHO as well. So I think that retrenchment from the multilateral sphere is another place we have to see. And finally, I think we have to look at who his nominees are. And again, there, I think there's a real sense of relief for, at least for the moment, for India, because you see the names like Peter Hegseth, Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, all names that are already familiar to India because they have worked on the India relationship in different ways or in personal ways. As far as Mr. Elon Musk is concerned, we do have to consider his particular desire for Starlink permissions as well as for tariff waivers, tax waivers when it comes to Tesla. And that's something we do have to think about, because Mr. Musk seems to come right now as part of a package deal with Mr. Trump. And finally, there are appointments like the DOJ appointee, Harmeet Dillon, who has some fairly strong views when it comes to India, and I think that's where we might see a certain irritant on the Panun case in particular that Ambassador Kumar referred to, whereas perhaps on the other case that has become an irritant in ties and led to the ruling party in India actually suggesting that the US State Department was part of a conspiracy against India, the Adani case, you may see Mr. Trump being a little more perhaps transactional and find a way to cut a good deal over there. So I'm going to stop right away.
Okay, thank you very much. As usual, introduce an element of reality check and thrown in some points in the end, which people will talk about. Now I turn to Dr. Sujit Bhalla. I don't know which president said is the economy is stupid. End of the day, we have a president who is a businessman, I mean a billionaire, turned politician, turned TV show host, and then now president. So I think he's a big follower of Milton Friedman, nothing called free lunch. So over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador. My brief is to talk about the economic issues involved, and that's what I'll stick to. On economic issues, what I'm most reminded of with Trump's second presidency and all that has gone on before is, I think it was John Mitchell who said this in the mid-70s. Watch what we do, not what we say. Now, tariffs is something that everybody has, whether it's defense, whether it is economy, etc., has mentioned. And, he's already withdrawn from the 60% to maybe it's 25%, and maybe it will be phased in rather. So we really don't know what he's going to do, but I think the prospects of the doomsday prospects for anybody in the world, including China, are not going to be realized with Trump number 2. Now, I think as far as, I think there is a lot of opportunity for India with the Trump presidency in the economic sphere and what Trump is emphasizing. We've all noted as to how economy has struggled or is struggling. There's been a big decline in GDP growth in India, in economic prospects, etc. And, I believe that a lot of the fault with the economy is not so much to do with the US or anybody else, it's got to do with ourselves. And that is where I think the more pressure Trump brings upon us to change our economic policies, and I'll mention a couple of them, the better it will be for the Indian economy. So I think as somebody very concerned about India's economic progress, I think this is a welcome opportunity. And now I'll try and go into some detail on the prospects of this. Look, the two major, and this is what Trump has been emphasizing for the US economy, the two major policy instruments that policymakers, governments have in their control, in their own control, is the tariff rates that you put on imports, is your import licensing or your FDI possibilities. And FDI has been recognized for the last 50, 60 years, ever since FDI came into being, which was starting in the 1960s, as the best, if you will, not remedy necessarily, the best catalyst for growth. And that is where we have faltered. What happened was that everything was going hunky-dory, as they used to say. And until about 2015 or so, when the Modi government brought in the banned, if you will, bilateral investment treaties. And what bilateral investment treaties do and have allowed to be done is when there is a dispute between the Indian investor and the foreign investor, then you try and negotiate and you try and reach an agreement. And if you cannot, it goes to a third country arbitrator. So that's what a bilateral investment treaty does. And what we did was that we said the existing treaties, and often they are 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, that as they expire, the bilateral investment treaty will no longer be operational. And what will be operational is if there's a dispute, and there's always bound to be a dispute, then you go to an Indian court. Now, it's well known that most Indians don't go to or trust an Indian court. So why should a foreign investor? And they voted with their feet to exit. So as the bilateral investment treaties expired, foreign direct investment in India collapsed. And last year, it was 0.8% of GDP, a level last observed in the mid-1990s. And this is obviously, so wherever there is talk about investment, we need investment. Of course we need investment. And FDI and investment, private investment, is a big contributor to growth. This is where Trump can be really helpful. That he says that, look, get real, and he will say get real. It affects, it was Harley Davidson that he was very preoccupied with, but that's, not even small potatoes. So I think on that score, I am very, very optimistic that we will change our policies. So we are not waiting for the US to change its FDI policy, its openness policy. Second, what is the other thing Trump keeps emphasizing? Tariffs. Now, India has been a violator of the basic principles of tariffs, of openness. Openness is what allows your domestic economy to be competitive, to be modern. Now, you've all heard of the military-industrial complex for the Western world. In India, I call it the IAS Babu Industrial Complex. These are the guys who prevent a competitive economy. Now, let me give you an example. Nobody has complained about software exports from India. Nobody has complained, and GCC now is one of our big, and services exports have just exceeded manufactured goods exports in India for the first time, okay? So, but manufactured exports, which is also Trump's major occupation, has been a major problem in India. Manufacturing has been a major problem in India. So you have the CII and all of these guys, they are, there was a recent decision on Nestle, where Nestle was not allowed or was taxed, etc., because of. So what I'm trying to point out, look, it's in the interest of Indian industry to not be competitive, internationally competitive. That's an age-old thing. You get rents from the system. When there is protection, you get rent. And that you are better off, but the country and the economy is worse off. So I think this is the one area that Trump's advent, or 2.0. The second, what else is Trump known for? Was lowering taxes in the US. And everybody thought this would ruin the US economy, et cetera, et cetera. And nothing of the sort has happened. Actually, the US economy is having its best times ever, and you just have to look elsewhere and see how bad the times are in most of the European and other countries. India did a corporate tax cut actually a year after the tax cut by Trump in the US, and has turned out to be very successful. However, I want to give you just a simple statistic, which is tax to GDP ratio in India. All taxes, state, local, etc., and state, local, and income taxes in India account for something like 19% of GDP. Okay? What's the level in the US? 20% of GDP. What's the level in Korea? 19% of GDP. These are very rich economies. Now let's look at our competitors. What's the level in China? 15% of GDP. What's the level in Vietnam, which we always compare ourselves? Look, Vietnam is doing so good, and we should do so good. Well, we should be as open as they are. They have actually the benefit of exporting some of China's goods, so that's an advantage we don't have. But their tax ratio is about 13.5% of GDP. So I think this is a wake-up call for India in order to enhance our relationship with Trump, and in order to benefit ourselves, not to benefit Trump, not to benefit the US. It's in our interest to benefit ourselves and to instill policies that will appeal to both Trump, but more importantly, will enhance India's economic performance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhalla. You have given wake-up call. I hope it will be heard where it should be heard. But I think you have said so many nice things about the Indian government policies that your chances of going back to IMF might have been brightened or dimmed. Thank you. Now I turn to Ambassador Pankaj Saran, who is participating for the first time with his background of having served as Deputy National Security Advisor. He's the best person to advise us and tell us, brief us, enlighten us about our defense security cooperation between India and US.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Kumar, and thank you for having me in this excellent discussion. You had asked specifically for me to address 3 issues, and I'll just stick to those. The current status of security cooperation and prospects under Trump 2.0, number 1. Number 2, how extensive and helpful intelligence sharing by the US is to India, especially from the point of view of China and Pakistan. And number 3, a little review of the ISET initiative and what are the areas which are of importance to India. So I'll just start with the first and divide my time equally. On the current status, I think it's good because from 2017 to 2020, during Trump 1.0, when we were discovering him for the first time, we found, and as General Rajinder Singh has also pointed out, there was a huge improvement and many initiatives were taken in those 4 years. And by the time he left, I think there was a big psychological shift in India that he had actually contributed significantly to India's security in ways in which we would have expected the United States to do, and which had actually not happened as fast in previous administrations. But having said that, we also saw some very disturbing contradictions in his approach to what was affecting our security. So, on the one hand, we saw this, and it was just coincidental that we had the 2020 standoff with China when Trump was in office, and that was the period which was actually baptism of fire or the litmus test of everything security relationships are about, which is how much can the United States assist and help and contribute at a time when India was really challenged on the border. And I think the Americans came out very well. And that was accompanied by other, structural frameworks that he put in place, like the Indo-Pacific and Quad and everything else. So on the China account, I think he was very good. And then we also heard many of his administration people talking a lot about China. We had a good team, Mattis and Pompeo and Pottinger and all these people. But just as we were feeling happy about China, we were also witnessing another incredible exercise going on under Trump, which was to just leave Afghanistan and basically hand it over to the Taliban. And this was on our border. This was on the western border. And we were unable to convince or to explain to him and his people that what they were doing was going to be a strategic setback for India and for everything that we had done in the last 10 years. So we had these two contradictory features. And I think that is going to probably be internalized in our own establishment as we approach his second term. Of course, this time around, because he knows it and everyone else knows it, it's his last term. He's got just 4 years. He's going to be a man in a hurry. And so short-termism, I think one of the American commentators seems to have used this word, actually describes him very well. So I think every day of these 4 years is going to be a challenge as far as we are concerned. But on the whole, I would say he laid a strong foundation for the security cooperation between India and the United States. And the prospects under Trump, the problem for me is that today national security is no longer military security or defense security. It is a composite whole of many other kinds of security, economic, technology, human, energy. And the problem is going to be in terms of how Trump sees his own security and how he sees India's security. And I'm not quite sure whether there will be a match. If in his mind, and I haven't heard very much elucidation from him about his conception of America's strategic security, it all seems to be boiling down to economics. But if in his mind, security is to be equated with economic strength and power and so on, the question which we have to ask ourselves is that in the march towards making America great again, how many other cookies are going to crumble, and are we going to be collateral in that march towards his perception of what heightened American security means? I think from the classical security point of view, it is very interesting to see that today, more than the Chinese, the people who are the most worried about the impact of Trump on their security are the Europeans. And it's actually really ironic that the transatlantic alliance and the NATO alliance, which is led by the United States, is itself feeling the most vulnerable about their own security vis-a-vis their primary threat, which is Russia. And this is a lesson for us, and we should never ever lose sight of it, that you can be dropped like this if it suits the project to make America great again. The second issue, of course, which you asked me to speak on was intelligence sharing and China and Pakistan. So as I said, if we have to go by anecdotal evidence, I would say on China, we seem to be okay. We have a track record with the Trumpian administration. Everything we've heard indicates that he continues to regard China as the primary strategic challenge to the United States. And so from that point of view, we seem to be okay in terms of being on the same page. But there's a downside and there's a little risk out here. How much does he expect from India in terms of his strategic rivalry with China? I think here we will have a problem of expectations, a mismatch of expectations. It could either be that he demands 100% loyalty from India, or he could expect greater burden sharing from India. And in either case, we are in trouble. So we are now embarking on a process of breaking the ice with China, moving forward in the relationship with China. We are turning around. I suspect 25 is going to see much more happening between India and China. And this is coinciding with a Trump entry, which is going to be disruptive, and how he sees the India-China equation and the relationship move may actually, so we may have some crossed wires between America, China, and India. But of course, it's also good from another point of view that he's not making too much of this Taiwan contingency business. I think he's not really invested in fighting a war with China on Taiwan, which is good for us. Because again, we are not at that stage in our life where we would like to enter into another war in our region. On Pakistan, again, past record is somewhat illustrative. He started with the South Asian strategy in 2017, which was very pleasing to us because he was very critical of the Pakistanis, but then he turned somersault. He needed the Pakistanis to get out of Afghanistan. And so we were watching all this somersault going on. And so this erratic behavior, and I suspect today and in the next few years, his primary project in Pakistan will be to probably wean them away from the Chinese. And that may compel him, or maybe he may rationalize to us why he needs to do more with Pakistan to sort of take them away from the Chinese stranglehold. On the third point, on the ISET, I have to say that the pioneer, and there's no enough words for ISET, who's sitting right here. I am again a little scared, a little unsure, for the only reason that if the agenda is to make America great again, and it is America first, and if I was Trump, the last thing I would do is transfer technology to India. So I'm not quite sure whether I'm going to do a self-goal in transferring my technologies to India, unless I see India can fit into my supply chain and make me more technologically competitive. Number one. Number two, I also don't like what my predecessor did. And so what he did was bad. What I'm going to do is different. So we have to take this ISET thing with a pinch of salt. People tell me that, we were both part of this whole exercise, that when you look at the actual delivery of technology transfer, reduction of export controls, there's not much that has happened. There's a lot of foam on the sea, a lot of meetings and all that kind of thing, but it's not really happened. So I will just say that on ISET, we know what we want. We want the best of the technologies from the United States. We want to be a step ahead of the Chinese. It's a race which is going on. We don't have time. But we have to see how much we can make ourselves attractive to Trump to get him to part with his gold and silver so that we can become stronger, so that we can participate in his China strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saran. Now we move to Ms. Arun Kumar Singh, who has been very patiently hearing all the comments of the co-panelists. He can comment about whatever they said. He has the floor. There's a lot of foam, as Ms. Saran said, but Arun can see through the foam because he is the father of ISET, as he said. So let us see. Floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. So I think from all the comments, we can make out that there is a certain level of anxiety about what will happen in Trump 2.0. Now, I have watched transitions in the US regularly since 2008. And at each transition, there has been anxiety. In 2008, when we moved from Bush to Obama, there was a lot of anxiety in India because during the Bush period, when they had tried to do the civil nuclear agreement, Obama, as a senator, had moved amendments that would have killed the agreement, and it didn't succeed. And then in an interview to Time magazine on 24th October 2008, he had said that he would like to appoint a special envoy on Kashmir. And that is a red line for us. And so but once he came in, the message was that he took the civil nuclear agreement as settled law. He'll follow up on that and not go by his earlier policies. And that when he appointed Richard Holbrooke as his special envoy for Afghanistan, Pakistan, he clearly kept India and Kashmir out of that mandate because he understood that India would not accept that. And then even in the Obama time, the relationship consolidated significantly. He visited India twice, the first US president to have done that. He was chief guest on Republic Day, the only US president ever to have been chief guest on Republic Day. He declared support for India's permanent membership of UN Security Council, and he declared India a major defense partner, which allowed us higher level technology releases for India. Now, once Trump was coming in after the election in 2016, you can all anticipate there was again a lot of anxiety because nobody knew what Trump was going to do. But a section of the Indian American community had reached out to him before the election. He was getting funding from them at a time when he was not getting much support. In October 2016, I think it was 16th October, he addressed a rally of Indian Americans in New Jersey before the election. His son, daughter-in-law visited a couple of temples there. So there was an outreach to the Indian American community there. And he invited Prime Minister Modi in middle of 2017 as among the first visitors for the Trump administration. And then we all know, and I think there's been reference to that he outlined it was his administration, the policy of the Indo-Pacific. He revived the Quad, which was languishing since 2007, as a clear message on China. But the important thing was that his was the first presidency after the US had reached out to China in 72, established diplomatic relations in 79, brought China into the WTO. President Bush started talking about China being a threat, potentially, but he was too preoccupied with 9/11, post 9/11 Afghanistan, to really do anything about China. And so it was the Trump administration that came out with a clear strategy and enunciation related to China and saw a partnership with India in a certain way in that context. Now, once President Trump left and the Biden team was coming in, I think there was less anxiety because we had seen him as vice president in the Obama administration and as senator for many years. As both the ranking member, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he had been involved in the passage of the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement through the Senate. So people had been aware of what he would have done. So given that, the fact is that whenever there is a change of government in any country, policies will change. You see it in Germany, you'll see it in the UK, anywhere else. But no country has the kind of power that the United States has. So when there is a change of government in the US, given the deep polarization in the US, it has an impact on everybody. So I think for the Indian government, Indian leadership, we have to get, and we are, very, very nimble-footed about handling the transitions that are taking place and building relationship with each incoming government, but not alienating the opposition. Because ultimately you need the bipartisan support for the India relationship, and that's very important. So I think that's one aspect. Second, if we look at what we had seen in Trump 1.0, how will that impact Trump 2.0? And as many have pointed out, and has been there in the writings by people who worked very closely with Trump, his national security advisor, John Bolton, McMaster, completely erratic and unpredictable nature of decision-making. Decided one thing today, something else tomorrow, so we have to be prepared for that. At the same time, many people have pointed out that Trump 2.0 is a far better prepared team than we saw in Trump 1.0. At that time, even he didn't think he was going to be elected. Suddenly people were being brought into the administration, people who did not necessarily agree with his point of view, so there were conflicts. This time, the team has been nominated by November itself, which is very unusual. Normally, the nominations names start coming out sometime in January. So they are very well prepared, and starting today, the nomination hearings are going to take place, and that will indicate some of the policy dilemmas going on. So he is clearly far more prepared. He is much stronger politically himself than he was in his first term. Now, the test of the extent to which the Congress, the House of Representatives, Senate is going to stand up to him will start today. As the confirmation hearings begin, how they handle people who are more controversial. Already we see reports that a lot of pressure is being put on senators who are uncomfortable about some of the nominees to get them to promote the nominees that have been put forth by the Trump team. So that's one. Second, going by the example of Trump 1.0, as Pankaj mentioned, on Pakistan, he started by being very tough, stop all assistance, and yet when he needed Pakistan for the agreement with the Taliban, he invited Imran Khan to the White House in 2019, and there he said that he was ready to mediate on Kashmir. Which was something completely not acceptable to India. And not only did he say that, he said that the Indian Prime Minister had asked him to mediate on Kashmir, which is completely not true. So he's the president of a major country not conditioned by facts in his taking position or articulation of policy. On China, very strong on trade, tariffs and whatever, and yet in January 2020, he did a limited phase 1 trade agreement with China, where made some concessions to China, and China said that they would buy more produce from the US, where everybody knew that they were not going to do it. But he had agreed to do that because politically he needed to show to the Midwest states that he was getting an agreement with China where they would buy more farm produce from the US. So we have to be prepared for the fact that if he sees something to be his political interest, he is going to pursue that. Now, on China, given all that, and that is clearly an aspect that is important for all of us, what his policy will be, we don't know. And the reason for that is that in his national security team, he has people who are seen as China hawks, be it the National Security Advisor designate, the Secretary of State, the name that is the Director of National Intelligence, the name that is coming out for somebody who might be the Senior Director in the National Security Council. The Secretary of State, Rubio, has in fact, has been sanctioned by China. So in the national security side, he has people who are China hawks. On his economic team, he has people who are invested in the China relationship. Elon Musk has huge investments in China. His Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, the Commerce Secretary, Lutnick, these are all people arguing for engagement with China. So there is a divide in the Trump team, and the expectation is that these two sub-teams will battle it out about what should be the China policy. And again, people who have watched Trump in his first term say that he likes that battle. He likes people working for him to fight among each other so that at some stage he might choose one policy, at some stage he might choose something else, so that ultimately he is the one making the call on what the policy should be. So I think that game is going to play out, whether you take a tough line on China, you take a softer line on the economic engagement, and I'm sure China will be watching that and try to see how they can leverage. Now, as far as India is concerned, I think one issue we'll have to watch on tariffs. Everybody has referred to that, and that he will expect perhaps some way to deal with the tariff issue, some of the market access issues. But I think the positive aspect there is that one of the spin-offs of the ISET that Pankaj spoke about was that you do technology partnership. Through technology partnership, you lead to production sharing. And once you do production sharing, you should have sectoral trading arrangement to facilitate that production sharing. And that way you try to show that there is something positive emerging in the trade relationship. And that has happened. After semiconductor decisions following ISET, when 6 US companies announced investments in India in semiconductors, our Ministry of Commerce, the US Department of Commerce in March 2023, did a MOU on a semiconductor supply chain. And the US Department has funded a study of the semiconductor supply chain in India to see how it can be integrated more with the US semiconductor supply chain. Similarly, in October 2024, India and the US have done a MOU on critical minerals supply chain. So there is a way of addressing the trade issue to show that there are new opportunities through which you can move forward. Then, of course, the issue of immigration. H-1B could be a challenge. But then even if it is a challenge, there is an option that if US, although it wants to disengage a bit from the world and China policy remains uncertain, it wants to maintain its preeminent position. And the understanding in the US is that if China is their main economic, technological, military competitor, they need a partnership with a country like India, with 1.4 billion people, and with availability of technical, skilled manpower to retain their global lead in innovation, including vis-a-vis China. So given that, there will be scope for partnership, and that will give us some leverage.
Thank you, Aaron. So they will like to have partnership with us. That is what we have been talking about. Give a big hand to our panelists. You have seen we have really selected people who can address different aspects of relationship. I think you are much wiser now than when you entered this hall. Now we open the floor for questions, about 15 minutes, but questions, no comments, because people have come here to listen to panelists. Only questions also 20 seconds. Now, Mike. I can't see you, sir. Can you remove your? Yes, please go there. He is first person that. Please identify yourself. Very briefly.
So I'm Sanjay Yadav. My question is for Professor Bala. So you said India has an obstructionist bureaucracy. But you know, bureaucracies are instruments. They're not in themselves anything. They represent other groups in the society. So unless you identify those other groups whom they represent, whose bread and butter is fixing people through rules, unless you identify them, nobody's going to heed your wake-up call. That's my point. So I think if you're serious in ending our obstructionist bureaucracy, then I think you have to identify the groups they represent.
Right. Thank you very much, sir. I'm Brigadier Dr. Anand Tiwari. I'm Director of MIT Defense and Strategic Studies. My question to two ambassadors, one former ambassador, Russia and the US. Future of Russia vis-a-vis US. That is question number one. Question number two, Russia being weaned away from China, will it not be in favor of Russia as well as the United States, as well as India? Thank you.
So first Pankaj, then Arun, both of you can address.
Yeah, I think actually this is one of the most important geostrategic shifts we are going to see, in my opinion, in the next 6 months or 12 months. His approach to Russia, I have no doubt that one of the first things he's going to do is to work towards stopping the war with Russia. And I don't think it's a bluff. I think he's completely serious about it, and in my opinion, he can do it. He knows how to do it. Everyone knows what the solution or how to stop it. So one of the things which comes out very clearly from his speeches and of his team is that between Russia and China, they regard China as the primary threat to the United States. And this is very different from the Democrats. And maybe within the Republicans there are differences, but broadly speaking. And that accords very well with India's own strategic view of the world. That's the first point. Second point, he has also hinted, and many of the others have hinted, on another strategy on how to de-link Russia from China. And again, this accords with what India has been telling the United States and the West, that instead of pushing Russia into Chinese arms, you need to have a smarter strategy of separating the two.
So just to add a couple of points to that, that in 1971, when US had reached out to China, the argument then was to sharpen the Sino-Soviet rivalry so that the US would gain in the balance of power, and which is something they managed at that time because they saw Soviet Union as the main challenge. Now the argument, as Pankaj said, is that if China is your main challenge, you need to take Russia away a bit from China. Now, Trump, in his first term, did try to move positively with Russia, but he was not able to, because there was so much opposition to Russia in the US political system that when the Congress saw that he was moving towards some rapprochement with Russia, they moved the CATSA, Countering American Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. It was an initiative of the US Congress, so that if anybody did major economic or defense purchase from Russia, you would be sanctioned. And Trump signed that into law because he knew that he didn't have the votes in the Congress to sustain a veto. So his hands were tied in that framework. Now today, two things we'll have to watch. One, what is his strength vis-a-vis the Congress? That if he wants to move with Russia, will Congress again constrain him or will not be able to constrain him? The second thing that has happened, which is a change since 2017-18, is that today the Europeans have become very anti-Russia because they see whatever Russia has done, right or wrong, in Ukraine as an immediate security threat to themselves. So if they see Trump moving towards Russia, bypassing their security interests, then the Europeans will be alienated from the United States. And that will raise questions about the transatlantic relationship. And if the Europeans are alienated from the US, then on the US-China policy, the Europeans will not go with him. Because the Europeans don't see China as a strategic threat. They see China only as an economic opportunity. And they moved, started defining China as a strategic threat only under US pressure. So there will be a dilemma for the US. So I think bottom line is he would like to move positively with Russia, but to what extent he's able to, we'll have to see.
Thank you, Arun. Now, lady here.
Good evening. My name is Bhavna, and I'm here in my capacity as a student, lifelong student of politics and economics. My question is around, different nuances of security. So when we look at security, we don't just look at the traditional paradigm. In the 21st century, we also look at energy security. We also look at space security. What will be the nature of India-US relations over the next 4 years in these two aspects, considering that we are moving on the direction of energy transition in India in a very big way?
Okay. All of you can really comment on this, starting from Swasini. Yes.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting because you remember when Mr. Trump came to power the first time, one of the first things he did was cancel all the aid that the Obama administration had offered India for the climate transition. He certainly didn't pick that up. He instead pushed much more, and he's likely to do that again for the US to continue to export fossil fuels, oil as well as LNG. So I think what you're likely to see is India-US ties still continuing to grow, but perhaps grow as much in terms of fossil fuels, where we know that there will be a certain amount of pressure, whether or not we find that in our interest or India finds it in its interest to go ahead with them. When it comes to the important energy transitions you were speaking about, I think the next few years are going to be a little bit of a reality check. We've already seen a certain reality check coming in vis-a-vis photovoltaic cells and the idea that we will need to be more dependent on China than we would like to be. We're also seeing the Biden administration strangely moving, whether it was their CHIPS Act, whether it is the latest semiconductor restrictions that they just passed 2 days ago, which is also a bit strange, certainly for us to watch an outgoing government make that kind of a policy move, where they haven't given India the exemptions. So it does seem as if India is going to have to hedge its bets a little bit when it comes to the to climate transition. But I don't doubt that on the clean energy, fossil fuels, you will see a lot more give and take between India and the US.
On energy, he wants to sell the energy to us. He wants to sell fossil, he wants to sell shale gas and this and that. So that pressure will be there. But the problem is that we are trying to shift to non-fossil and to green, and that the road leads to China, not to Washington. So there will be a contradiction, I see, in the energy mix and the path that we are both going to take. On the space, of course, I think it's easier, much easier. On space security, I think there we are in a very good position. And because of our own reforms in the last couple of years, so there I think it's easier, much easier to work together. And I think it's a sunrise sector from the space security, not the dual use, both civil, commercial, and non-civil.
Okay, Arun.
So just a few points. That it's a challenge to deal with the US when their policies keep changing. So I remember in the Obama administration, they used to tell us, please don't use less coal. And then came Trump and he said, please use more coal and buy more from West Virginia. And then, of course, we bought a certain amount of oil and gas from the US as part of the effort for the relationship. But then, their sanctions compelled us to reduce imports from Iran, from Venezuela. We had to find alternative sources. So we have to work our way around that. On space, a lot is happening. Following the ISET initiative, there is discussion on cooperation related to space. And India and the US are now going to mount a joint mission to the International Space Station. US is also training an Indian astronaut. And they have said that now they will bring the US and Indian private sector in space to do more together, something that was not happening earlier. And then you'd have seen reports that the US Space Force has now placed orders on 2 Indian companies, one 4AI and third iTech, for supply to the US Space Force, which again is an indicator of the growing confidence. And similarly, the whole exercise that Pankaj referred to under the Initiative on Critical Emerging Technologies, where talk of the new technologies, AI, quantum, semiconductors, defense, space, as if they are going to completely transform the way we live, the way we work, that's an area to do some work, and certain amount has been happening. 6 US companies have announced investments in semiconductors. In defense, the US authorized 80% technology transfer for the GE414 engine, which is something they had never done before. In fact, it stopped in 2013-14. And that US initiative, something called INDUSX, India-US Defense Acceleration Ecosystem, has been launched. And they've met thrice. We're bringing together startups in defense technologies from both countries. And joint sort of challenges, joint awards have been done. So certain amount is happening, and we have to work to build more and more on that.
Dr. Bhalla.
Yeah, I think the elephant in the room, no matter what the issue, is China. And I just want to point out, I'm not as, if you will, conflicted with Europe and the US having different views on China. It was Trump who started the whole initiative, the quote-unquote anti-China initiative, and the Biden administration doubled down on that. And I see very little prospects. It's very encouraging that there is Elon Musk and others, and you just saw what somebody had mentioned, that they will move. Now we are talking about TikTok being bought over by Elon Musk there. So, but anyway, there's a recent statistic, and I just want to put this on the table, why everybody is very fearful of China and should be on the economic side, let alone its relationship with the military side. The Chinese trade surplus has just crossed $1 trillion. Post-World War II, when the entire world was devastated, you had US as a preeminent manufacturing power, right? There was no place you could buy it from. And the US trade surplus, manufactured trade surplus, in the late 50s or whenever, never exceeded, is less than half of the manufactured trade surplus as a percent of GDP that exist today. So I would not think that, so I think that's the biggest security in the world, and there's politics there, there's economics there. I think whether it's energy, whether it is space, and I think it's very encouraging on the space side. So bottom line, I do see that the US-India relationship, economic, political, no matter what dimension you want to look at, is going to get much stronger. And I think China is playing a role in that, or will play a role.
Okay, General Singh.
A word or two about energy security. As you would recollect, that during the first Trump tenure, there were a lot of pressure which was brought to bear on India to stop importing oil from Iran, which was much cheaper, much better, as one of our panelists had mentioned. I think the same is not going to happen this time. Because in the last administration of Biden, we have held our stance as far as importing oil from Russia is concerned. And if the efforts of Trump tomorrow to broker peace between Ukraine and Russia succeed, then maybe there'll be a lot of new openings as far as India is concerned, both in the field of defense production, defense imports from Russia, as also in the field of oil. And hopefully Trump would be much more accommodative to India when it adopts an independent line in this. As far as the other issues are concerned about space and all, of course, like the ambassador just now mentioned, I think a lot is happening on this. And some of the systems which we have brought, some of the other wish list of ours contains certain equipment which will allow us to keep certain amount of observation as far as space is concerned. So hopefully the future is going to be brighter.
Professor Mahapatra.
Just a few concluding observations. Number one, Donald Trump might try to undo some of the initiatives that Biden did towards India and other countries. One issue in my mind is Indo-Pacific Economic Framework Agreement. Whether it will continue or not is a big question mark. Second one is the IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe. What is going to happen, nobody knows. We thought for a while that the turbulence in West Asia is delaying it, but how Trump is going to approach, we don't know. It may just be buried. Second, Trump will try to dismember some of the new groupings, like for example, in the midst of the Ukraine war, you have Russia-India relationship, Russia-China relationship coming up so close, and more recently, India-China relationship. He will try to break it. In what way, we don't know. The way he made statements on Panama and Greenland and Canada, probably Putin must be laughing, and maybe this is an indication. If the US wants Greenland, why can't Putin keep Donbass? Why can't Taiwan be part of China? So it could be some kind of signaling to have some kind of negotiation. As far as China is concerned, is China a threat? Is China an enemy? Is China a rival? All kinds of characterizations are there. The fact remains, sir, you talked about China's $1 trillion trade surplus. The fact remains that in spite of all kinds of characterization, US-China trade surplus is several times more than Indo-US economic trade. So China is important, indispensable economic partner to most of the countries in the world, including the United States. So that disruption has to be limited and constrained. So let's not have big hope that US and China are going to fight a trade war. Let's find out how to make some benefit out of it. That China is de-risking, but de-risking may have some benefit for India. It just may not happen.
Okay, thank you. I have only time for one question that goes to the youngest questioner, the last line.
Thank you for considering my question. My question is for Ambassador Singh.
Who are you?
I'm Shrestha. I'm Shresht, a research intern at the Center of Geoeconomics for the Global South. My question is for Ambassador Singh. As National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan visited India recently, and there was progress made on India-US civil nuclear cooperation. Should we expect any progress in this sector under the Trump administration, or what are your opinions on that? Thank you.
So from my understanding, from what came out in the public domain, that this was a particular authorization enabling Indian companies to cooperate in technology development with US companies in civil nuclear energy sector, something that was not possible earlier because of their technology restrictions. And also some of the Indian companies related to nuclear who were on the entities list, some of the important ones, including Indian rare earths, have been taken out of the entities list now, so that they can partner with US companies, including, for example, the small modular reactors, which are under development. So it's a positive step, but we have to see. This is just an enabling provision. How it leads to actual cooperation, we'll have to see.
Okay, once again, big hand to our panelists. And give a big hand to yourself for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you, good night.